You do not want to work with anyone who is not an expert in financing multifamily. If you're going down this road, trust me, just don't do it. Lots of people who have an uncle or a cousin who's a mortgage broker or what have you, it's just not a good idea if they're not focused on this stuff. Even if they're investor focused but don't do multifamily, that's not going to work here. Just my opinion, but that's not going to work. Welcome back to REI Hot Seat. Andrew Hines here for another solo episode. And this week I'm changing pace. What we're going to be doing today is talking about high level, what do you need to know to buy multifamily in Ontario, Canada, and the rest of Canada. So this will apply to Canada generally, but we're going to get into some Ontario specifics too. And the reason I'm doing this is because we talk a lot of generalities. We get a lot into the weeds in a lot of the different episodes we do, but not really anywhere in this show is there one condensed episode with just a little bit of a guideline to buying per se. So whether you're new to investing or whether you're experienced, either way, I'm confident there's going to be something in here for you. And even if you just want a refresher or one place to go to kind of get your thoughts straight, I'm going to just go high level, what you need to know and what your process should be from my perspective. Of course, everything I express here is my opinions. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a mortgage broker. I'm not a realtor. I'm not any of those things. Just an investor with quite a bit of experience that's giving my perspective. And yeah, let's dive into it. So first things first, I think it's most important to understand your financing situation and how you're going to buy buildings. So high level, what's the difference between residential and commercial financing? Because that's really what it comes down to. In Ontario and in Canada, if you're buying typically 4 units or less, that's considered residential with most of the banks. There are a couple of banks that will consider even up to 6 units residential, or they used to anyway. I'm not sure if they still do. But the general rule is 6 and above, now you're for sure into commercial multifamily financing, which a different department in the bank handles. And why do you care about this? Well, you care because if it's commercial multifamily financing, now you're getting treated treatment where they're actually valuing the building more than you. They're looking at the building, what income and expenses the building has, and seeing if the building satisfies what they call a debt service coverage ratio. And they're looking for a ratio. It could be 1 to 1.1 to 1, 1.2. And I'll explain more about what that means when I pull out the spreadsheet. But basically the benefit for investors is if you go commercial multifamily, you can scale. Whereas if you're doing everything with residential and you're just buying one rental property after another, all single units and duplexes and triplexes, eventually the bank is going to say your ratios don't work. And I used to work in mortgage financing, so I know how that works. I used to try and get people qualified for those mortgages with a lot of frustration. And the real secret is going commercial multifamily, which I didn't even really know back then the things I know now, which include the ability to take 2 triplexes if they're in the same neighborhood or nearby or even side by side is best, and go to a bank like RBC and have them financed as a package commercially. So that kind of thing can be done, which the possibilities are out there, and knowledge is power in this regard. So I would highly suggest that you work with a good mortgage broker, but I'm going to dive a bit more into the mortgage concept and what you need to know. Okay, so the next thing is, if you're going commercial multifamily, you're going that 6 unit plus, which is a lot about it's primarily the focus of this show, talking about buying multifamily and larger multifamilies. If you're going to be doing that, then the next thing you need to decide is, do I want to use CMHC insurance? And CMHC is a government-backed insurer that backs the bank. And why do you care about that? Well, the reason you care about that is if the bank feels protected in their loan, they'll give you higher loan to value, they'll give you longer amortizations and better interest rates. So that's why investors do it, because it makes deals that would not work otherwise work. Now, the negative, or the double-edged sword here, is that when you have programs like CMHC and CMHC's program MLI Select that offer really easy to access financing, it actually props up asset values. So it makes the assets actually more expensive. With all that said, there's still tons of opportunity. And when it comes to MLI Select, which is a program CMHC offers, or just regular, the old legacy CMHC program, there's a lot of value there. So what are some of the terms you can expect? Well, normally with investment properties in commercial multifamily, you have to have at least 25% down. They'll go 75% loan to value or less. So sometimes it's 70, sometimes it's 65. Usually with multifamily, it's 75, but that could change. However, if you use CMHC, just the legacy program, they'll go up to 85%. Now there is an insurance premium that's added to the mortgage, so you got to consider that. And then if you use the MLI Select programs, those programs are basically they're a special program that allows you to get even more. You can go up to 95% loan to value if you top out, and that's based on a point system. And the points are earned by either A, if you make your unit more affordable, so you price your rental units under market rent. So a certain portion of your building would have to be dedicated to be under market rent to satisfy the program requirements, and you'd have to keep it that way for like 10 years. I don't know the exact figures. Talk to your highly skilled mortgage broker, but this is my understanding. And then you can also do accessibility to earn points, which means, are you handicap accessible? How many units do you have that are that way? And then you can also do energy efficiency, which to my understanding, energy efficiency can get you 50 points where 100 points is max. So you can't get there all the way with energy efficiency, and you used to be able to. But as Jacob and team have told me, this program just keeps changing. So you're constantly adapting. So what I'm saying now in 3-4 months might not even be the case. So check with your mortgage broker, and I would highly suggest that you reach out to the guys at the investment group. They're the regulars on this podcast/YouTube show, and they will be able to tell you who they work with. So they have a couple of highly qualified mortgage brokers that focus on this type of business, which, believe me, you do not want to work with anyone who is not an expert in financing multifamily. If you're going down this road, trust me, just don't do it. Lots of people who have an uncle or a cousin who's a mortgage broker or what have you, it's just not a good idea if they're not focused on this stuff. Even if they're investor focused but don't do multifamily, that's not going to work here. Just my opinion, but that's not going to work. Okay, so other financing that you would want to know about. Vendor take-back mortgages. So very, very common strategy, especially with sellers in the current market, when there's a little bit of uncertainty from a buyer's side. So now sellers are having to make concessions to get buildings sold. Sometimes, not always, but they'll consider, if you give them their price, they'll consider holding back financing for you. In other words, they'll be the bank. They'll lend you the mortgage. It's going to have a term on it, and it's going to be due at the end of that term, but they're going to do that in order to get the building sold. So this is a highly advantageous. I've done this on properties that we've bought, and it can really make a deal work. And we're doing this in the U.S. as well. Seller financing it's like you can write a deal, like a deal that wouldn't work otherwise. You can make deals exist that just would not exist otherwise. Like a deal, I'll give you an example, stuff we're working on in the States. We're making offers to people, getting an institutional first and then getting a vendor take-back or seller financing in second position so that we have 0% in the deal. We're actually writing offers that way, and we're really close on some of them. Some of them we're getting 95%. We're getting in that ballpark, 95% financing, including seller financing. So it can make deals work, and you can write those seconds, like we're writing them in at very low percentages, sub 3%. So imagine getting second mortgages at less than 3%. You can see how that could make deals work and make cash flow work. Very, very, very valuable. Okay, so quick thing, I'm going to just show you. If you look on my screen right now, you can see the cash flow sheet. This is a version of the cash flow analyzer spreadsheet that I share on my website. If you go to andrew-hines.com, you can find this sheet for download there. And this sheet is where you can calculate some of the key numbers, including debt service coverage ratio, or DCR, debt coverage ratio. You can see this one, it doesn't work, but these are just mock numbers that I have left in here from a previous deal I investigated. But I'm going to show you how that all works. But if you want something to base your analysis on, I'd highly recommend grab a copy of that sheet. I believe Jacob and the team also give a copy of their sheet away if you join the REI Hot Seat. The REI Hot Seat mailing list, which is through the link in this show. So if you're on YouTube, it'll be below the video. If you're on any of the podcast platforms, it'll be in the show notes. Join that insiders list. It's going to give you all kinds of awesome perks, as well as get you access to off-market deals and access to speaking to a member of Jacob's team who can talk to you about your goals in real estate and all that. So okay, so let's get into the next things now that we've covered the financing. And I mentioned the spreadsheet because you can actually calculate your financing, your AM table right in the chart. So you can actually calculate amortization and how that's all going to work. All right. Structuring your deal. Okay, so the next thing is corporation versus personal. And believe it or not, there are still some people who buy multifamilies personally. I think it's more common to see it, people who've owned for a long time that own personally. So, that old Italian guy who still cuts the lawn, owned a building for 40 years, yeah, that guy probably owns it personally. I see it. It's way more common to have corporate ownership. And there's a number of reasons I think people do it. I think liability is a big thing. I think cleanliness of filings and of credit applications is probably the most important factor. So if I want to go get financing on my building or refinance it, it's neat and tidy if I only have one building and one corporation. So I have a 10-plex and I have one corporation for that 10-plex. If I do that, then I'm not mixing and matching. Like say I have a 10-plex and a 5-plex in the same corporation. Now I have to separate those two things. Now I've got income lines that combine both. So I'd have to have very, very good bookkeeping accompanied by financial statements and work backwards with the loan officers, but it's going to make it far more complicated to get approved with having multiple assets in the same company. So if you're following that, hopefully you are, it just makes things easier to have corporations. However, the negative is if you have corporations, every single one of those corporations needs annual filings. You're looking at $3,000 at least for most accountants to do that. Then you're gonna need bookkeeping. You're gonna need to pay a QuickBooks Online or Xero or some other software for a bookkeeping software, which, that's gonna be like another $1,000 a year. So there definitely are implications, and you need to do it with the end in mind. What is your goal as an investor? Why are you even doing it? And then if your goal is to buy 10 properties or 20 properties, you're going to go corporation, because if you have that stuff personally, good mortgage underwriters on the residential side know that you should exclude them, but there are many that are going to look at those buildings and say you own those buildings personally, and they're going to count against your personal income qualification when you're trying to buy your own home. So it's nice to have that separation. Is it absolutely needed? No. You can do it personally still, but I believe that a lot of banks, the sentiment is they want to see corporation too. It kind of speaks to how serious you are as an investor. So just something to consider. Tax-wise, it's better to own them personally because you just pay at your marginal tax rate. However, in a corporation, like passive income in a corporation is something like 50% tax rate. So don't be scared by that. And I'm not an accountant once again, but it's 50%, but if you use capital cost allowance, you can basically remove a lot of your income. So capital cost allowance is just writing off a portion of the building's value over time to offset income. So if you would have made $10,000 that year, you could just write off $10,000 of the building's available capital cost allowance, assuming you had the available amount. Talk to your accountant. And you could just zero your income so taxes weren't an issue. However, some people, it's not going to be avoidable. You can't avoid the income. So then at that point, what you can do is you can take a dividend and bring your effective tax rate down to 20%. So I'm not an accountant. This is how it's been explained to me. So talk to your accountant, they'll explain it. But it was one of those, don't be afraid, Andrew. Here's what we can do. And I have owned, multiple properties and corporations, and that's very normal for me. So definitely a doable thing, but as I've said before, not the simplest thing, because obviously there are extra things you have to do for every corporation you have, and I don't like that. I don't like the complication of it. I just accept it for what it is, and I have many corporations and organizations between Canada and the US, and I've accepted it. It's part of doing business. Okay, so what are some things you could do in terms of one thing I forgot, liability. People say that you have less liability with a corporation, but I argue with that, because if you are the owner of a corporation and the director, then if something happens, somebody slips and falls and they want to sue somebody, they're going to sue the director of the company anyway. So you're still going to get sued personally. Those are my thoughts. So assuming that's the case, I don't really put too much weight on the liability protection of a corporation. Not to say there's nothing, but I just don't think it's anything close to rock solid, quote unquote. I think that it's really important you have good insurance, really good insurance that covers good liability, and you understand the policy and what it exempts. That's very important so that you're covered. Talk to a very good investor-focused insurance broker, and don't play games with insurance. That's my personal feeling. If you can't afford a complete loss, do not play games. All right. So structuring deals, we've talked about corporation versus personal. The next thing is, are you bringing in a joint venture partner? There's plenty of people out there who do not have the time to learn about multifamily investing and to feel comfortable buying it, but they got money. If you know one of those type of people, you could approach them and say, hey, I've become a bit of an expert in multifamily because I study it. It's all I do. I've been looking at a deal, and I've found that we can earn this much. I have an opportunity. Would you like to hear about it? I can earn you this much money. Something along those lines. That's, not my exact advice. That's just an idea of how you could approach it. That's something that you can do if you're new, you want to get into multifamily, but you don't have a ton of money just yet. It's better than the BRRRR strategy currently, in my opinion, because forcing the value with today's, uncertainty in the market isn't necessarily going to be most people's plan A. It used to be easier when property values were always going up like this. It was way easier to just do a BRRRR where you're buying a property, renovating it, and then refinancing it right after you rent it out, and trying to get all your money back. That's a great strategy. It works in a market that's going up a lot better than it works in a semi-flat market. Okay, so next thing is doing your due diligence on any property. So your first step is always talking to the mortgage broker. As I said, speak with Jacob's team, and you're going to likely get put in touch with an expert who can guide you on next steps. They're going to go through go through your personal financial picture, talk to you about your structure, talk to you about what you can do and what you can afford and what you can expect, and then you'll have an opportunity to go from there. So what you're going to get on any property you tie up, and before you go see a building, I can't stress this enough, do not go see a building until you know that the numbers work for you. Everything about that deal works, and now you're going to go see it to confirm what you've seen on a spreadsheet or on paper. It's very, very silly to go see buildings just because you like the way they look when you haven't looked at the numbers. You gotta know that the numbers work for you and your personal goals. So first thing to get your rent rolls, get confirmation of expenses. You can get tax bills, you can get insurance bill to see what kind of coverage and what it costs. Utility bills, you can get them to send you that, or you can get them to send the financials, but it's better to actually get the hard documents because your lender is going to ask for these things. Get a building condition analysis conducted by an engineer or a certified building inspector that is capable of inspecting multifamily. These reports are much longer than, say, a residential home building inspection, and they're typically done by somebody far more qualified and capable that has a better understanding of the mechanical elements within a multifamily complex or structure. So, we're talking boilers, we're talking flat roof systems, things that you don't see in the average residential home. So definitely hire that out. The information in that report is going to be useful to you in the future. The lender also may ask for it, so that's good to have. I also would highly suggest that if that all checks out, you order yourself an environmental assessment. You're going to want to get a phase 1 at very least. You can ask the seller if they have one. If they do, wonderful. Check that assessment. Make sure that it has no recommendation for a phase 2 study. Phase 2 would be beyond the observational. So phase 1 is observational. It's when they go in and they say, hey, are there any environmental concerns here? Lenders want to know this. So you want to know this because you want to get financing in the future. Was there a gas station here? Was there a dry cleaner here? Are there any contaminants, or is there a likelihood of contaminants in the soil or in the building? And the first thing is observational. They're going to do a history. They're going to look at the area. They're going to go in, and if they see no cause for concern, they don't recommend a phase 2, which is actually taking samples, digging something up, maybe smash a floor, test underneath, test some soil outside. Once you get into that, then you might get a phase 3 recommendation, which is time for remediation. So that's where it gets real expensive. But if you have a clean phase 1, cool. That's what you're looking for. That's what lenders are going to be looking for, in my experience. So don't welch on that. You're going to want it, especially on these higher priced assets, a little bit of due diligence and spending the money. This is a risk because you may find something that makes you not want to do this deal, but it's kind of necessary. It's part of doing business, and you might do due diligence on 1 or 2 properties, three properties, and get to that stage and then have to back out. I think that's pretty unlikely, but a lot of them are already going to have a phase 1 they can just share with you, which is going to be great for you. Okay, so some of the stuff they're going to check is they're going to check obviously roof, plumbing, heater, their boiler, heating boiler, and then electric, if there's any concerns there with aluminum wiring, if things need to be pigtailed, and then give you sort of an estimate of what needs to be replaced or fixed. And now you can use that to go renegotiate with the seller if needed, if you need to get a price discount to cover some of that stuff. You're going to want to look into zoning, leases. Are all your units legal? Do that research. Contact the municipality. Make sure that there are no issues there. Number one thing is making sure that the zoning reflects the use. So does the zoning match what it's being used for, or is it zoned commercial and they're operating residential units in there, you're going to want to know that, because then it might mean that all your units are illegal and then there's not much of a future there. But this stuff will come out. Some of the when you do your appraisal report, they'll do research on that too. And by the way, very good idea to get an appraisal. Most likely your lender is going to require it, even if you are working with CMHC. If you're not, then typically don't. You typically have to have one if you're not with CMHC. Okay, so a couple of things to watch out for. One, obviously don't take the seller's estimates on anything. They can give you expenses, prove them, but get the actual hard documents, get the insurance documents, get the tax bill, actually have hard documents in hand, utilities, etc., and then a real rent roll. And now you can make your own pro forma. And I highly recommend that you use CMHC guidelines, whether you're using CMHC financing or not. The guys over at the investments group that are usually on this show, Jacob, Dave, and Brad and Zach and the team, they can help you with that, help you put together the estimates. I don't have them all handy offhand. I believe maintenance is $750 to $850 per unit per year. They do 4.25%. For management, they do 2% for replacement allowance. So things like life cycle replacement. So you're doing your roof every 20 years, you're doing your windows every 20 years, what have you. You want to put an allowance for that, and CMHC does that. So you're going to want to get those exact estimates, use those, and then that now you have something that's apples to apples. So now you can just, any property you're evaluating, you use the same guidelines. So it doesn't matter what the seller sends you, because every seller might send you something different, but you now know how to make every building apples to apples, which is going to make it possible for you to make a decision. And you'll get really good when you use those guidelines at just doing quick mock-up pro formas of buildings you just see online, buildings that get sent to you by a wholesaler or by the REI Hot Seat Insiders list. And now you can do your own analysis. Of course, those guys use the CMHC analysis too. So that just makes things easy. I like the idea of doing that. I like what CMHC has done to the industry, because they've kind of standardized how people present their numbers, which just makes it better for everybody, easy for everybody. So when somebody says, oh, it's a 6 cap, maybe it actually is, assuming they use those guidelines, and you can quickly check when you pull up their pro forma. All right, so let's see some other things I had notes on. You're obviously going to be wanting to watch for major life cycle items that need to be done, but your building conditional analysis is going to tell you that. Any under rented or rent controlled units, definitely look into that. Find out where your rents are and where they should be from a market standpoint. Are any of the ones restricted and not able to be increased? Is there some sort of municipal restriction on that? You do want to just check into that stuff. But if you're working with a good realtor, they're going to tell you that stuff. Title issues, that's another one that you're going to want to watch out for. But with title issues, your lawyer is going to get involved there. So good idea to just get your lawyer to do a title search early in the process. Once you're pulling the trigger and you're spending some money here, get them to do a title search early, see if there's anything that comes up that may hinder your wanting this building. And you can obviously ask the sellers, but whether they tell you or not, you don't know. It's just one more thing that you need to just spend money on when you're doing this, and it's money well spent to make sure that you can get clear title, or if there are any issues, you can voice them to the seller early. Odds are if something comes up, I don't really worry too much about title issues, because if something comes up, the seller's going to have to fix it if they want to sell the building. So whether it's me or anybody else, so it's in the seller's interest to fix the title issue if there is one. All right, so key takeaways here. If you've been watching REI Hot Seat for a while, you know that Jacob and team, they always talk about seeing the deal from start to finish. Like when they get a listing, they don't just let the seller price it however they want. They talk to the seller about, well, let's think about how a buyer would buy this. In what scenarios would they buy it? Maybe there's more than one scenario, and they'll go with whatever makes the most sense for the average buyer that's going to come buy in. And usually that's going to be some sort of program these days, like getting on CMHC or potentially up to MLI Select. And they're going to put that scenario together and make sure that it makes sense for the buyer. They're going to look at the things that the lender is looking at early on. What are some of the things CMHC would want to see here? What are the things that we need to do to the building to make sure that it can qualify for financing, and how does it need to be positioned? So the key thing is understanding what the lender is going to look for, because you as the buyer, you're not going to buy cash most likely. Most buyers don't, because it's very, very inefficient from a cash on cash return. A lot of people, as I've mentioned before, are taking advantage of these CMHC insured financing opportunities, which are getting them cash flow when they wouldn't otherwise, getting them up to 50 years amortization, which is kind of absurd, but a tool nonetheless, especially if you believe the market is going up over time. And I do. In 50 years, obviously buildings are going to be worth more because currency is just going to be worth less. That's my opinion anyways. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But anyways, those are my thoughts, the quick high level, what you need to know, checklist, so to speak, when it comes to buying multifamily, condensed into a 15-minute episode. I hope you got some value out of this. I highly encourage you, join the Insiders Club, the REI Hot Seat Insiders Club list, where you're going to get an opportunity to connect with Jacob, Dave, and team and talk to them about your multifamily goals, whether it's as a buyer or a seller, and really get access to these off-market deals, get access to spreadsheets that they offer, tools, etc., that are just going to help you in your journey. So take a moment, do that. It's below the video here, or it's in the show notes if you're watching on or listening on one of the podcast platforms. And I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. If you enjoyed this, show some love to the channel, send this episode to somebody you think could benefit from it, and I'll see you again next week, hopefully with Jacob, Dave, and team going over a deal. We'll see you then.